Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Personnel Today webinar in association with Protime. My name's Jo Faragher. I'm Consulting Editor with Personnel Today, and today we're going to look at how businesses can build a sustainable workforce plan over the coming year. Perhaps you had a busy peak season before Christmas or have a difficult quarter coming up. Insufficient planning for these periods can lead to more overtime, higher absence, and reduced employee engagement. So how can we get on top of these swings in demand? Today, I've got three great guests. First of all, we have Jane Bunting, Head of Human Resources at CareCo, a mobility retailer. We have Hayley Macdonald, Director of People and Organisational Change at AICPA and CIMA, the global body for professional accountants. And finally, I'm joined by Simon Garrity, a workforce management systems specialist at Protime UK. His role is to help organisations improve their productivity and employee experience through technology. I'll hand over to our speakers in just a sec, but before I do that, I wanted to let you know how you can get involved with the discussion. So on the bottom right of your screen, you can share your comments in the chat button there. And if you have any questions for the speakers, post these in the questions tab, and we can put these to the panel in the Q&A segment. Today's session is being recorded, and after it's done, you'll be able to watch it on demand. You'll also have the chance to share some feedback. In a moment, we'll do a quick poll, but first, I'd quite like to ask our speakers to introduce themselves and tell us about how peak periods show up in their particular organisations. So, Jane, would you be happy to kick that off?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Bunting. I'm the Head of HR for CareCo. We are a mobility retailer across the UK. We are in our planning period at the moment. Our busy period comes up as soon as Easter hits, and our busy period runs through till the end of September, when all our demographic want to go out, enjoy the sunshine, and so they're looking for mobility scooters, walking aids, and those kind of things. So that's us in a nutshell.
Fantastic. And Hayley, what about you?
Hi everyone, I'm Hayley Macdonald. I'm the Director of Organisational and People Change at AICPA and CIMA, and we're a global professional body for finance and accounting professionals. And in terms of peak times, our departments across the organisation and around the world have different peaks, so different ebbs and flows, whether it's sales cycles, exam cycles, or sort of member events. But I think the biggest challenge we've had of recent years is around we're doing a lot of change as an organisation, and layering that on top of business as usual is causing peak periods.
Thank you. And we are having, I don't know if everybody else is having a little bit of a difficulty seeing Simon from Protime at the moment, but Simon, I wanted to ask you if what Hayley and Jane were saying, are those common challenges that customers raise with you?
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry you can't see me. Some people would say that's an advantage, so count your blessings. This has become a common thread over the last few years, actually, and there's a number of driving elements to it. I think we all talk about things post-COVID, and this is something else we've noticed with the feedback we get from our clients. It originally started off as a conversation about what we tended to call the golden quarter, which generally is the last quarter before Christmas for various reasons across different markets. And we pursued this in a number of blogs that we did, and the communication with the clients of what do you learn from the golden quarter, and how do you keep reapplying those on a year-by-year basis, so the knowledge gained is vital when you sort of start to replan. And we began to see, and customers were definitely agreeing, that yes, they were gaining a lot of information and data regarding the golden quarter, but by the time they got round to September again of the following year, that sort of feeling had gone, and they were back to replanning again and not gathering the data and utilizing it to the best effect. On top of that, what a lot of customers began to point out was it isn't necessarily the last quarter of the year, which is their golden quarter. It could be the middle of the year when the holiday season is upon us. It could be the beginning of the year when the tax years are ending. There are lots of elements that we split into the different quarters. when we posed this question back, we began to realize that the data gathering required during any element of the year, which could be repetitive, needs to be reapplied into some kind of learning mechanism, whether that's the use of the likes of AI or just general information that people are discussing. So yes, there's no question that handling those peaks and troughs is absolutely vital for planning the business going forward.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I'm going to throw it out to the audience now with our first poll. So let me just publish that now. Hang on one moment. Hopefully you can see that.
Turn my camera off, by the way, just to make it easy to people.
So the questions we've got to the audience here today are, what was the biggest source of pressure in your last peak? Was it overtime and labour costs, skills gaps and capability coverage, absence levels or short notice gaps, demand volatility across sites or shifts, rota stability and fairness concerns, or manager workload and approvals? So just giving you a bit of time to go through that now. So by far, the strongest response to this is skills gaps and capability coverage. There were fewer responses on managing absence levels and short notice gaps and overtime, and not much about rota stability. So either Jane or Hayley, would you say skills gaps are an issue for you when handling peak periods?
It definitely is for us, which is why we have to start quite way ahead of the game. So because our peak period is the summer, we also then have obviously people on holiday because of the school holidays for our staff. And we need to make sure that because we have over 5,000 products and we have quite a big CRM system to use, we can't just bring in a temp to cover a telephone. So we have to make sure that we know it's not really a people problem, it's a planning problem. So if we take it back to this time of year in February, we start recruiting for those sales positions now so that we have got those staff in place and make sure that we are as fully staffed as we can possibly be, but ensure that everyone is competent, and we work really hard through that induction process to make sure the competencies are there. So when we hit that peak period, everyone is ready to cover. So you're not relying on the same kind of 2 or 3 people all the time to do overtime. So that's
not constantly catching up with themselves.
Absolutely, but it's making sure that competency bit for the first kind of 8 weeks of their journey into our company is really, really vital.
Yeah, I suppose, Hayley, it's a bit different for you because the peaks are spread across the business and there's lots of different departments involved, that sort of thing. Can you expand a little on that?
Yeah, sure. So as you say, for sort of day-to-day work, I think the departments handle it quite well. We've got quite a cyclical cycles. The teams knows what's coming up. The challenge we have is when we come into big cross-functional projects. So one of the big ones was a new CRM system a couple of years ago, and it's having the same sort of cross-functional leaders that are required on multiple meetings, multiple project team calls when they've got their day job to do as well. So again, back to that prioritization and planning is absolutely key for us, and also making sure that we bring in more talent, and it's not just always necessarily the department head that's called in, but if they've got volunteers under them that can start getting involved a bit more cross-functionally.
Thanks for that. And what key measures are you both using to look at performance changes during peak periods or skills gaps?
Basically, it's the data from our performance management, really, and we look at that and make sure we're really on it. It's a massive, especially from an HR perspective, it's quite a big bugbear when we have poor performance management from our line managers, or there's a complacency about it, and that we ask them that they really have to keep on it. And from HR, I mean, we're putting in a new system at the moment that will chase them, but at the moment we're doing that to make sure that we're seeing that they are doing everything they can to support people, to make sure they're trained properly, and they don't just say, there you go, there's the website where there's a telephone, and get on with it. So there's a lot of training involved, but it is also making sure you're behind those managers and supporting them.
Yeah. And Hayley, have you got what sort of transparency measurements are you putting in place or have in place?
Yeah, similar to Jane, really. So a lot on our performance management cycles. We've introduced now reporting as well. So are people doing their check-ins? Is it in the system? And if it's not, we're sharing the data to show where it is and where it isn't. And then on the other side, a lot around employee voice. So getting out and hearing from staff and hearing what their concerns are, or frustrations, or if they've got capacity and want to develop skills in other areas. So yeah, taking it from both sides, really.
Yeah, that's it, because so much of it is about how it impacts engagement, isn't it? Because you don't want everybody coming out of that peak period and not feeling ready for business as usual in the next one. I mean, Simon, perhaps you could talk about the role of data in supporting these decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, though, that percentage it almost correlates exactly with some of the data we've had fed back from our customers. Typically, when people have in the past talked to us about workforce management, time and attendance, rostering, scheduling, and all those elements of what we tend to hear, historically, overtime and labour costs has been very high, and skill gaps has been lower, but there has been a sea change over the last 3 or 4 years that where the skills gap and capability coverage has become much higher on people's priority when looking at workforce management. And I think there's a general feeling within the industry now that a 360 view of what the business is encountering during these periods is a much better way to look at it than just potentially how much does it cost me to hire agency workers, or how many orders did I fail to fulfill because we had a skills gap shortage. We can't run a shift because 2 key members of the shift are away. And so where traditionally skills gaps and capability has been seen as a long-term plan, i.e. looking at your succession planning within your business and areas where potentially you're going to have a problem 12 months from now when the golden quarter comes around again. Now it is much more like, what kind of coverage do we need in the next 4 weeks, no matter where we start from? And are we exposed in order of how the business is going to deal with these areas? Because looking at the people we have within the organization, do we need to retrain? Do we need to improve retention so that we don't start getting gaps in that we can do something about? People move jobs, as we know. People take holidays, people are off sick, that's fine. But sometimes businesses need to look harder about how do we stop people from moving away from the organization, ensuring that their well-being is strong enough within the organization so that they are available, and therefore reducing the element of skill gap capability so that we're dealing with a much lower level. And I think we're seeing this more so for me, and a piece of research we did last year in relation to the Gen Zs is that they have different priorities about what they want out of a working life. And therefore, sometimes they want flexibility, which doesn't necessarily suit all businesses when you need the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time. So I think businesses also got to be aware that things are changing in terms of how the workforce approaches these things. But absolutely agree with the poll. That has moved up from, I would have said, 3rd or 4th a year ago to now being top. How do we keep the people we've got? How do we ensure they're trained efficiently? How do we get the most out of them? How do we keep them happy? And therefore, how do we fill those gaps when the business actually has to function on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, culture is a massive thing where we are, and because we're retail, we are kind of stuck a little bit with some of our timings. So, we can't have people working from a showroom at home because the elderly and the disabled need to come and try our products. But we make sure that we have our benefits. We speak to our staff about what they want and what that work-life balance looks like. and because we have weekend working as well, so we want to make sure that everyone is treated fairly and they get that time off. And then head office, you know, we've managed to make sure when we built our building that we have the majority of people in there, that there is a cafeteria there that's open from early, so if they want to come in early and they can and have their breakfast there before work. And there's we're lucky enough to have put a gym in and stuff like that, so we kind of counterbalance the fact that we can't do much hybrid working, but we make coming to work as sociable as we possibly can, which kind of helps.
And having the data on how that improves things is one way to justify those investments, isn't it, Jane?
Absolutely. So we do some pulse surveys and get those back from everybody of what, and mainly they want to talk about the culture rather than the work. That's really, really important across the generations, to be honest. Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, obviously the ideal is that that businesses are proactive and they can see these skills gaps coming over the horizon, and they train and they hire, rather than doing everything on the back foot. But have you had instances, Hayley, maybe you can jump in here, where the data told you a story and you had to react to that and you've made changes since?
Yeah, probably going back to the technology example.
Yeah.
So we brought in a new system a couple of years ago. It affected right across the world, loads of different departments. It's mainly our CRM system. And as with many technology implementations, it wasn't smooth. So we had sort of all hands to the deck, and people having to drop the day job to get the system and get the customer experience right that we needed it to do. Since then, we've learned a lot around the balance maybe between working with external consultants versus our in-house expertise, and getting that right, making sure staff are really listened to in the process and their feedback taken on board. And I think that prioritization piece, really getting leaders to work cross-functionally, is a big piece, and that's something we're continuously trying to improve with all our leaders.
That's a really interesting point again, because one thing we've seen particularly when we're dealing with people in the middle of procurement, is that, and the poll demonstrates it quite well, is depending on who you talk to in the organization will tell you the answer to which you may get. So you may look at talk to a financial director who thinks that overtime and labor costs are the biggest problem, because you've got too many agency staff, or you can't recruit the right people. If you speak to somebody in HR, they'll tell you that the succession planning and skill gaps is the most important. If you talk to operations, absence levels. So during procurement, when we're looking at clients obtaining new solutions, we have a much broader input from companies than we used to. Typically, we would have spoken to HR people and operations. Now we speak to, or our touch points with any organization are right across the board, and from hierarchy right the way down to shop floor as well. So that influences, again, where people see the issues. And there is definitely a much greater joining of HR and workforce management solutions these days than there was typically in the past, because the data within those two systems, when combined, is hugely powerful in terms of decision making.
Yeah, and just goes to show how it cuts through to everyone, doesn't it, as well, from the shop floor right up to the C-suite, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to go to another poll now, and let me just publish that. And this time we're looking at, where did your plan and reality diverge most in your last peak? So we're talking about what's ideal and what actually happened. So the question options we have here are that forecast demand was off, staffing supply was off, so that could be whether you needed to use a recruitment agency or not. The skills mix was wrong. Scheduling rules and processes did not hold. Data quality or systems limited visibility, or decisions and approvals were too slow. So just give everyone a bit of time to have a look at those. There's quite a lot of options.
Fascinating.
So it's definitely a more even split in this one. And just kind of edging to the front is that forecast demand was off for around a quarter of you. Similar proportion though, saying their staffing supply was off, and that's now going back up. But yeah, it was to do with kind of supply and demand, particularly of staff, I think, and then your ability to make decisions. But interestingly, in this one, it wasn't about the skills mix. So maybe Simon, what was your reaction to the...
Again, it is exactly what we're experiencing, and it goes back to something I mentioned earlier, which is different systems interacting with each other effectively to give quick information to make quick but accurate decisions. There is no question that there's a gap, and I think a lot of businesses are seeing this in the interaction between different solutions to give effective data to make decisions, because that then impacts on all of the top three. We know the skills mix is going to play a part because of the previous poll. That makes perfect sense. But people need accurate information from their workforce, i.e. from their managers, from their people, so that the HR can react, so that finance can react, so that operations can react. So it does move to the previous question quite well, in that there is no golden wand to wave to fix any one of these. It is a combination of things across the whole realm of the business that needs to come together in order for people to make decisions. And without doubt, even though we're seeing some improvements in the way that AI is delivering data, that ability to make decisions quickly is causing people problems in terms of how they manage their workforce. So it makes perfect sense to me, that.
Yeah, I was going to ask about AI actually, and obviously a lot of HR software companies and just about every business software company at the moment is flagging up an AI tool within it. And if you're in a business like Hayley's that has multiple functions and is all over the world, and one that's quite that has peaks and troughs as James does, I mean, how trustworthy is AI in this context? Do we think? How do you, to Hayley and Jane, how do you feel about using AI to support your decision making in these contexts?
Do you want to go first, Hayley?
Yeah, I can do. I think, to be honest, we're still sort of at the beginning of that journey. So we are very much thinking about adoption across the organisation. We've got some who are running ahead and at their own pace, and then others who we're having to convince a little bit more around the need to engage with AI. So it's undoubtedly going to change things, and I think it's, from a capacity point of view for us, it's actually making sure we've got capacity to understand how quickly it's all moving and the impact it's going to have. So yeah, more work to be done for us on that front.
Yeah, it's a learning.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things that we've started to use as some tools with regards to actually helping people with some of their customer interactions, because some people's English is not necessarily that great, and some people have reasonable adjustments in place, and AI can help and stuff like that. So I think it's very good. I used to be really scared of AI until I heard a quote on the radio saying that if you'd gone back 300 years and someone said to you, get into a metal tube and go up in the sky, you'd think, don't be ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't think twice about getting on an airplane now. So I've got to embrace what our scary part is for our generation. And it does have its really good uses, but it's also a little bit worrying as well. I know that we are a very human company. We have 600 employees, and we want to keep it as human as possible, because going back to what we were saying about the people side of it, people, the more you communicate with them, the happier they are. You ask them, you make them feel involved, so then they don't want to kind of run and leave you when you are going through your peak period. And if we have an intranet system that we put in place. It's a basic SharePoint one. It's nothing major, but it's really revolutionized our communication with everybody. And some people have started to use AI to communicate through that, and it's very obvious. And people are actually shouting, well, you didn't write that, ChatGPT did. So again, people, it's trying to convince, as Hayley says, nudge people to use it, but for the right reasons, and not just use it for laziness. So it's also keeping that human part in there, which I think is really important. So it's a balancing act. We don't want it answering our phones, that's for sure, because I know that my mum tried to book something on an insurance thing the other day and got an AI bot talking to her, and she got very, very confused and upset. Whereas, of course, our demographic, I think the average age of probably 84. So it's like, no, we need to make sure that we're human still.
Yeah, I suppose there's a role, maybe, Simon, for AI in analysing some of the backward-facing stuff. So looking at reports from the last peak quarter and withdrawing insights from that, as opposed to, or making some predictions, but then having some human input to that. What do you think?
I couldn't agree more. We at a recent event where I actually met Jane and Hayley. The single biggest question that was coming me of the 20-something meetings I had was regarding AI. And my question always turned on them was, where do you think we are? And I think the answer is pretty broadly the same from everybody, is that it's coming. There's nothing we can do about it. It very much, even though we are a few years in and it's rapidly growing. We've got AI models writing AI models now, which seems like a great idea. People are still concerned that it is very sterile in the way that it manages problems. I'm not saying it's incorrect, but the human touch is absolutely essential to keeping this working. I mean, it's all well and good saying that you can handle, the same number of people can handle the same number of more calls by utilizing AI before it arrives at the human being. The question is, when does the human being interact and when does the AI stop? I think also there's the question of there are a lot of AI tools out there. You're absolutely right. It's very popular in the HR software world at the moment. Whether or not it's still an evolving learning engine is questionable, or whether it is just something that is literally what I would call an enhanced chatbot rather than full AI. I do think we're 2 or 3 years away from AI being able to deliver effective solutions. But the single answer I got back at the event was, we need the human element to it. We can't put employees at risk because they're not getting the information they need effectively, merely because it's a way of handling more volume rather than giving a quality of return.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do we think about, I know we mentioned it a little while ago, but about the role of well-being, or thinking about well-being, when we're trying to create a more sustainable plan for the year ahead and ensure that we're not having these huge peaks and troughs. Are there ways that you do this? Whether, I know, Jane, you mentioned your benefits and the things that are on site. Are there other considerations you're looking at? Hayley?
Well, I think it all comes down again to the communication and asking what is wanted. We are about to embark on doing town hall events, so everyone can see us and hear us monthly from the top down. So they will see the managing director giving some results about the company, because that's what seems to often lack, is that people know what they're doing for their little bit, but they don't understand what everyone's doing, and they don't understand where their role is so important. Because we talk about sales all the time, making our money, but you forget about your forklift driver, and if he wasn't there helping us get these products out to our customers, then the whole thing would fall apart. And making everybody feel that they are as important as everyone else. And I think that's a massive, massive key to that, so that they are part of why the peak is really important, and why we need them there, and why we need them to be fully trained, and why we need them to step up for us, and share the good news rather than it always being bad news. And that well-being piece comes into that, and making sure that they are heard. And I think that's a massive thing. It's about listening to what they want. I mean, we can't give them everything they want, and you will never please everybody, will you? But making sure there are just those little touch points that you have with everyone. I mean, it might sound daft, but literally this week we've had love heart sweets and chocolate sweets out because it's Valentine's Day coming up. And it seems silly, but everyone really loves it. And it's just those little things that kind of help boost morale and keep that up. So yeah, communication and keeping people happy.
That's a really good point. What about you, Hayley? Any sort of advice you'd have on that point?
Sure. So a lot of what Jane just said, we do very similar. I think the extras I'd build on would be around, we've done a lot in the last sort of 18 months around creating awareness of what is psychological safety and why is it so important. So if people do have concerns, making sure that they're comfortable to voice them. We've done a lot of manager training on that and trying to get them to create that feeling for their teams. And also recognising it's not always easy for the line managers. So we run quite, I think they're weekly coaching sessions that are just completely drop-ins. But if managers have concerns or have tricky situations, they just need a bit of help thinking through how they'll deal with it. One of my colleagues is a qualified coach, and we offer that out to staff and managers to work through those issues. And as Jane said, wellbeing being right up front and centre of everything we do, whether it's your basics like your EAP system and having that really accessible and reminding staff constantly that that's there, through to the sort of the day-to-day and sort of hand-holding that the line managers will do.
Yeah, just people know that they're heard as much as anything else, don't they? And I suppose one of the experiences we haven't really talked about yet within this is the customer experience, because the customer may be asking an awful lot of your staff, and it's really hard to take both aspects of wellbeing into account and both aspects of expectation, isn't it? So how do you balance that? I don't know who'd like to take that one.
Should I go? I think you're right. I think it's having very clear services that we provide to customers, having clear ways that we engage with them. Again, that line manager support, so everyone's on the same page, I think. But equally, we have a real strong mantra that the customer is king. So if there is something going wrong and the customer needs help, then making sure that everyone is focused on that and also all hands to the deck if that's what is needed.
Yeah, one of our things is that we change people's lives, because that's what we're about. And when it goes a bit wonky, we make sure that is really, really looked after. So not only the staff, because people can be quite horrible as a customer, as well as, us making sure that the customer is king. Yes, we do, but they can, especially when you're dealing with emotive subjects like their mobility, like getting out, like, their scooter's broken and they can't go out then for a couple of weeks. We're having to deal with quite heated conversations. So you have to look after the staff from a safeguarding perspective as well. And two, one of the best things I think about my hierarchy at CareCo is if there is a problem, normally it ends up on Trustpilot, and then the owner of the company gets involved. It doesn't matter. We've got something like 67,000 Trustpilot reviews, and I think he knows everyone because he's just a bit odd like that, bless him. But he wants to make sure that everyone is looked after, from his staff all the way out to his customer. So that touch point is also there.
Yeah, Simon, do you have any points about balancing the customer experience with the employee experience when we're planning ahead?
It's difficult, and I heard an interesting discussion yesterday on Radio 4, funnily enough, talking about AI, the use of AI within the insurance industry, and whether or not, as consumers, we when we look for the cheapest price, but then demand the highest customer service off the back of that, whether or not by looking for the cheapest price and accepting that at the time we want to buy it is us giving up on the chance of getting great customer service further down the line. And I'm not saying that's true for a minute, but it raised an interesting thought in my mind, is that how as consumers do we approach AI? We like it when it's useful for us, and we don't like it when we feel that we should be treated like a king. And I'm an old timer. All customers should be treated like a king. It's fabulous to hear Jane and Hayley saying that that's the way their businesses operate. I think it's great. There's no question that well-being in the workforce or well-being in your customer base is a way to keep happy employees and happy customers. So it always seems like a bit of a no-brainer to me to make sure that your customer service team are happy and getting everything they need, that they can manage difficult phone calls, because they will happen, and that your customers know that they can get through to a human being rather than a chatbot as quickly as possible. We've all been in that situation where we've been wrestling with a chatbot for 20 minutes before we actually find a button that'll get us to speak to a human being. I've even tried typing in, "Can I speak to a person, please?"
Doesn't work.
It doesn't necessarily work. But it is this flux where we are at the moment with AI, that it's capable of a great deal, but it needs to be a lot smarter than it currently is. And whether that's a consumer, a customer, or an employee trying to get information from HR, it doesn't really matter. Making that person feel good is the most important thing of all.
Excellent. I'm just going to ask one short question before we go on to questions to the panelists from our audience. And it's really about the main lessons that you've learned from peak periods and planning. And it doesn't have to be a big, long answer. Just maybe share, even if it's just a couple of words, but what's been the main things you've learned about planning ahead? Maybe you, Hayley, or Jane.
That's right, go.
I would repeat, I think, what we said earlier on around making sure there's cross-functional voices. Everyone's got a voice, and you're hearing from multiple stakeholders. And then the other thing we've done as part of that is really leaning into change management and making sure that when we are dealing with change and we're creating these peaks, that we're really planned, we're really thinking about the people experience of change, as well as the change itself.
What about you?
I think from my perspective, it's, you look at the data. Have you spent loads of money on overtime? So if you have, look at that data, look at it early enough, and then try and just remove the chaos from the peak by making sure you plan. I think I said this the other day, it's we all know when Christmas is coming. And I know my husband leaves it right to the last minute because he tends to forget to go out and get a present. And I have to remind him that if you'd have done it in October, November, like I do, you wouldn't be running around like a headless chicken. And I know Christmas is the same time every year, so let's just plan in advance for it. And I kind of say that to my board. It's like, it's coming. So why have you not made those decisions and made it ready? So that's just the way I would say it.
Absolutely. So as we go into questions now, and do continue to put them into the questions tab, one of the questions is on that point you made, Hayley, about liaising with other departments. And so how do we ensure that HR liaises properly with other departments when forecasting demand? And who should lead this?
So we do it in multiple ways in our organisation. So we have HR business partners who are very much sort of right-hand people to our exec leaders. So if it's within their area of sort of control, it's funneled through the business partner. And then my role, where I look at sort of enterprise-wide change, if it's going to affect a lot of departments, it tends to be myself and the business partners joining up to make sure HR are in the mix and we can support everybody.
Jane, is there a particular way you?
It used to be me. Now we have literally, as of the 5th of January, implemented business partners for the areas of the company, which is already working really well, rather than everyone ringing me, teamsing me and everything else. But the best way I've always done it is to just make sure you have a regular contact with your department heads and the senior team, and make sure it filters down properly so you know that you're all talking. So it might be a weekly or monthly meeting that you sit down and go, right, okay, what is that data, and bring it to the table.
Okay, and I have another question in from Adele, which is a really good question, actually. In a project-based environment with variable workloads, so there's no peak season as such, how can we plan recruitment to balance staffing levels, ensure business growth, and build a bigger team?
Go, Hayley.
Shall I say a couple of things we do? And it's something we're always working on and always trying to refine. But I think one is particularly in HR, we're trying to get better on explaining to business leaders what this work will take. So it's no good telling us you want somebody in post tomorrow. Well, recruitment's going to take this amount of time. Actually, you've got to get your job defined and everything before that. So making sure the lead time is really clearly explained and your stakeholders understand it. And then the other thing we're exploring is sort of different employment models. So that idea of contract and expand as you need to. So using contractors, using a sort of small network of people that know our organisation fairly well, but aren't necessarily sort of tied into full-time and permanent employment relationships.
Yeah, and we've actually had a question in about 0 hours contracts from Charlotte, and she asks about whether any of you have an insight into how the clauses around guaranteed hours that are coming in with the Employment Rights Act might affect workforce planning, because you're going to have to factor in potentially giving people notice of their hours, aren't you? Simon, is that something people have been asking you about when?
Yeah, there's still a lot of confusion we find following on from the legislation, to be honest. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer to this yet. Every business will be influenced by 0 hours contracts in a different way, and some businesses not at all. But I think it goes back to a couple of questions, which is, and it's the same answer, so I don't want to be repetitive, is that the whole business has to look at this. The changes in the legislation surrounding HR, whether it's 0 hour contracts or anything else, is a business-wide question. It's not an HR question or a payroll question. It is now a fundamental way that the business needs to react. And just listening to Hayley and Jane speaking, not treating anything in isolation in terms of whether it's a system solution or whether it's just a management solution is the way to deal with most of this. The more stakeholders from different parts of the businesses are involved in day-to-day questions and day-to-day answers, the better. Silos are done. They don't work. They will not work in the modern way that they did years ago. And you have to start from your workforce's point of view. So again, 0 hour contracts are coming to an end. How businesses deal with that, I honestly don't know the answer to that yet. It's not something we experience. We don't have anybody working in that environment, but our customers do. So it's a common question. And the answer I'm giving at the moment, which is, go back to what Jane and Hayley said, which is give yourself time to make decisions that are going to influence this. Keep your people informed about what that might mean to them. And utilize the non-silo activity within your business to bring in those stakeholders. That then brings a level of communication which the people who are most affected by it can then react to, and they will react better if they feel the business as a whole is making that decision and informing them, rather than just one area which seems to have more of a stakeholder than any other.
Yeah, and would you say, Simon, that more sustainable workforce planning tends to happen better in companies where they've broken down those silos because they are speaking to each other? Without doubt. Yeah. Without question. Yeah, there are still. I spoke last year about, and I mentioned earlier about Gen Z having a different attitude to their working idea. That is something very much upon us. I'm a child of the 60s, so I can remember a very different working world where all of those old-fashioned ideas were fine, that people left school, went to university or didn't go to university, entered a job that works whatever hours, go home and do, and there was a pattern that you could see that was predictable. The modern workforce doesn't see it that way. So the businesses have to react, and the UK, I'm fortunate enough to work across Europe, but the UK has a problem here, that we are quite old-fashioned in our senior approach to what business should look like. We've seen it only this week with politicians calling for everyone to go back to the office. It's not as simple as that. That culture doesn't necessarily exist any longer. So business needs to adapt rather than just reverting back. And the more we adapt to flexible working patterns, the more we improve well-being, the more we keep our employees informed about decisions that are being made that make sense to them, the more workforce you'll retain, the less your costs will be,
the fewer skill gaps you will have, and business will succeed. So everything we've discussed comes together in that point, really.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we've probably got time for a couple more questions now, but let's see if anything comes off the back of this one. It's kind of a comment that goes into a question. So this is Stephen. He says, in my experience, it all stems from demand and getting the forecast assumptions as close as possible. But the knock-on effect has been that headcount and staffing is then not meeting the demand because it's been incorrectly forecast. So if we're working off incorrect forecasts, what can we do? Because that then impacts decision making and impacts well-being and impacts all the retention. So how can we respond to that? That's quite a difficult situation to be in, isn't it?
It is, but it's exactly the point we've just been speaking about, which is non-siloed data, non-siloed information, and good communication. It is very, very difficult in some working environments to predict labour force. Somebody mentioned the project world before. Absolutely, it's not as easy as, you know, we make 1,000 widgets every month, and in the run up to Christmas we make 3,000, and that's fairly predictable. It is more complex than that now, but by looking at data right across the business, and I'm a big fan of data lakes or data warehouses or whatever, encompassing as much information from all over the business as possible, that will smooth out some of the peaks and troughs and curves. You're never going to get rid of them entirely, because that's not the nature of a modern business. It needs to be able to react and way quicker than it used to. But it all comes down to data, accurate data wherever possible, good predictive data. And this goes back to the very first point, which is when if you have a golden quarter which runs up to Christmas, and you ignore that data from the last 3 years, you can't make good predictions about the next year. You'll make a generalization, but the more data you can gather, the more information and the more communication, the better it will be to predict what that's going to look like.
Fantastic. And just so I'm going to go to the final question now, because we're coming up to time shortly. So Sally says, do you have any concerns about the impact of changes to statutory sickness pay that are coming in April? What might that mean for workforce planning? And because it become easier for employees to take sick leave from the first day, is that going to have any effect? Maybe Hayley or Jane could come in on this one.
It's a funny old one, sick pay, because we don't pay any sick pay in our company as standard. So, but still, many people do still take time off sick, and we have, still have those absence levels. It will be interesting to see what the difference is. I don't personally think it makes that much difference that people then wait, because they'll still have that odd day off anyway that they're not going to get paid for. So I don't think it's going to have a massive impact, but I'm perfectly happy to be stood corrected. But Hayley, what do you think on that?
Yeah, same for us really. I mean, our sick pay is fairly generous, so people get paid from day one anyway. So on the company enhanced benefit. If anything, we have the opposite problem with hybrid now, of people being sick and just saying, oh, but I'll continue to work. And obviously then the burnout risks. So, so our problem's slightly sort of the reverse, really.
I'm quite mean on that. I put my foot down on that and say, if you're poorly, I don't want you working. So I'm quite tough on that.
You don't want to be making your customers sick, do you, Jane?
Well, no, if you have the retail side, yes. And then we have we only have hybrid of 1 working day at home in our company, if you can. And yes, often say, I don't know, a finance or supply chain or something like that will say, oh, I'm not feeling great today, so I'm going to work from home. And it's like, actually, no, if you're not well enough to come in, actually, I don't want you, because for that reason, from a welfare perspective, if you're poorly, you're poorly. So you go either fit enough to work or you're not fit enough to work. So yeah, but I don't think, SSP is actually such a low figure anyway that it doesn't make that much of a difference, I don't think, to people. And
I also wonder what your average employee's awareness is of the changes at the moment. Anyway, we all know a lot about it because we read about it all the time, but It's not saying, oh, I can't wait till April and I'm going to take the first day off sick. I don't think there's much of that. Simon, do you have something to say on that?
I'll be honest, it's not a topic I know a great deal about, but we're a little bit like Hayley. Our support from the business is very generous. There is very much an attitude within the business that if you're not feeling well, we need to support you and we need to help you get better as quickly as possible because you're more productive. If you feel that you can be sick and you'll come back to work and there are no consequences as a result of that. So, I mean, I also agree SSP is so low, it won't make a huge amount of difference. All the data suggests that the biggest issue that businesses face is sick leave. That people are sicker or appear to be sicker than they used to be. I think also from personal experience, some of that is being driven by mental health. We came off the back of COVID with a much better understanding of people's mental health and the challenges that it raises and supporting our employees through difficult times. A little bit of that seems to have faded over the last few years. I know it's now 6 or 7 years maybe since COVID, but I don't think it would do the UK any harm to adopt some of those thoughts. And again, if your workforce is happy because they know they can trust you as an employee to support you whenever needed, even if it is a day's cold or 2 days cold or childcare or whatever it may be, then you go back to retention of your workforce and a workforce that wants to remain in your organization, wants to grow in your organization, which brings back training and skills gaps. Am I more useful to my organization because I've got 10 years of experience and I've not moved around a lot? There's lots of moving parts to it. Sick leave is one small area in terms of what the impact is from the change in the legislation, but I think it's a huge part in terms of how people view their working world.
Yeah, we're quite hot on loyalty, on the kind of loyalty schemes for staying with us for quite a long time. I think our average loyalty at the moment across the business, I think, is 38 months, which I'm quite pleased with. We have some people that have been there obviously from the beginning, and I'm not just talking about the hierarchy. I have a young lady that works for me that's been there since there were 11 people and now there's 600. So, and I often ask her opinion, because obviously the company's changed massively, but the fact that she was supported through her maternity and on all the different, she has a disabled child. So we also support her quite a lot in flexible working and things like that. So it does make absolute sense to make them want to work for you. And yeah.
Retaining is cheaper than recruiting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Our motto in HR is nice is clever. So if you're nice to people, then you'll get them to do what you want.
Yeah, and presenteeism can be just as bad as sickness, can't it, Hayley? As you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, everyone. Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Thank you to Hayley, thank you to Jane and to Simon for your insights today. And thanks to the audience for the questions and listening in. We run a number of webinars at Personnel Today, so please take a look at the webinar tab on the homepage, where you can watch past events on demand or register for upcoming webinars. Our next session on the 5th of March is looking at leading through uncertainty, how HR can improve adaptability. So once again, thanks for joining us today. This has been a Personnel Today webinar in association with Protime. Goodbye.